Welcome to Exemplars of Style, Navigating the Fashion World as a Model of Color. This is Conversation Part 2. I am Professor Adrienne Jones from Pratt Institute, and I will be the moderator for this portion of the program. Today, we will be speaking with the fabulous Beverly Johnson, first African-American model on the cover of Vogue and Elle magazines, and the equally fabulous Peggy Dillard, model and founder of the famed Turning Heads Salon. Ladies, it is such an honor to be able to speak with iconic individuals as yourselves who have paved the way in the fashion industry. And also want to give a thanks to the National Museum of African American History and Culture for putting together this amazing event. Now let's get started. Beverly, let's begin with you. What prompted you to choose a career in fashion, particularly in your area of expertise?
Well, it chose me, actually. I was on my way to Northeastern University. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I had finished, my first year there when my mother for the summer told me that I had to work in a fashion boutique because I had no clothing for college, for university. So I worked in this fashion boutique in Buffalo, New York. My father was a steel laborer and my mother was a nurse. And I worked in this boutique that summer before I went to college. And there was a woman there named Mimi that said, if you ever give up this idea about becoming a lawyer, you should be a model. And I was like, excuse me, I'm going to be a lawyer. Thank you very much. And she had given me this number if I ever changed my mind. Long story short, I went off to college. I worked at the YWCA teaching swimming because that's what I did part-time. And I decided I was going to stay in Boston for the summer with this summer job and also go to school. And the jobs were cut short. The girls from New York City that were at my college university said, you should be a model. And I was just like, what is this thing about a model? I hear it all the time. And they literally picked up a fashion magazine and showed me these two blonde women, blonde, blue-eyed, white women standing there with their hands on their hips. And she said, they make $75 an hour. And I was like, $75 an hour? My father made $75 a week. To make a long story short, I kept that piece of paper that Mimi from the Jenny shop in Buffalo, New York gave me that summer before I went to college. And my mother called it. We went to New York, and the rest is history.
Peggy, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Well, the irony of this is that I'm on camera with Beverly Johnson, and I grew up making fashions with my mother. At the age of 13, I had my first full figure line, but I was also shortly after that working in a department store as a stock girl, and I opened up a glamour magazine, and there was Beverly Johnson in a swimsuit. And I said, if she could do this, I could do this. And my mother said, yes, but you must go to college and have something to fall back on. So I went to Pratt Institute. I found myself doing projects in the hallways of 550 building all along 7th Avenue and meeting designers. And my interest was more in design at the time. But one day Ralph Lauren said, try on this outfit. So that's really was my beginning in college, working with designers, working in the fashion merchandising department of Pratt, going on assignments. And for 2 years, I modeled without any agent at all. And I have to give credit to particularly the Black designers like Scott Barry, Stephen Barrows, even Ralph Lauren. They gave me a lot of showroom jobs. And whenever Women's Wear Daily would come in to photograph their lines, they would ask me to shoot it. So that was more or less my beginning.
Now, both of you have not only modeled and been on covers of national magazines, but you've also had successful careers of entrepreneurs. What would you say is your most defining moment and why?
Well, I would say being a fashion model, you are an independent contractor. So you are your own boss. So we are entrepreneurs. We didn't get a salary. We didn't really have a boss. We enlisted agents to work with us. We are our own company. So basically, it was a great lesson for entrepreneurship in the in the sense of how we know that word today. My defining moment was the American Vogue cover in August 1974. I mean, every time I say that, I just can't believe it. And it was a very defining moment for me, because as a fashion model, that's where you want to go. You want to be on the covers of these magazines, and particularly Vogue. But also, I hadn't realized at the time the impact that would have on women of color, Black women globally around the world, that said on Madison Avenue in America that Black is beautiful. So that was my defining moment as an entrepreneur.
Models today think of themselves as employees rather than the principal. And I always say we are the principal and the agents work for us. So you have to have an idea of who you are. For me, I was an art student when I started working. And even though I had done my first Vogue cover, to be honest with you, I felt my defining moment was when I got my lingerie contract with Vassarette Lingerie. And for 6 years, I was flown back and forth to Tokyo shooting lingerie commercials. And at that time, no woman had ever been, lingerie had not been shot on a body. It was always on a form on television. So I was the first, and I had become a star in Japan and didn't even realize it. They would whisk me in, whisk me out. I'd stay for a month at a time. And while I was there, I fell in love with the kabuki makeup brushes, and the kabuki theater was my passion. So Mr. Takashimaya, who sponsored me to come to Japan, he actually owned a company that made these brushes. And I said I would like to import them and take them to America. Soon after that, I was supplying MAC makeup in all of the better pharmacies and department stores. And I had a sales force from South Africa to Hawaii. And it was called Trade Secrets. And I was working with Halston one day, who said to me, if ever you create a company, don't put your name on it. He said, because you'll lose control of what your mother gave you. So I called it Trade Secrets. And sometimes I'd be on Vogue shoot saying, I just found this brush, let's put it in the picture. So that was my first business. But I think the business that I'm most proud of is Turning Heads, because it was created at a time when work there was no work, when businesses were closing after Black Friday. And I had moved to Harlem. I had $40 in my pocket. And I sold this idea to create a natural hair salon because my hair was natural. And every time I would go to a salon, they wanted to relax my hair. So I said, somebody should do a natural hair salon in a place where, it's clean and you have quality control. And this little voice said, if somebody else is supposed to do it, that means you're supposed to do it. And shortly after, I basically couldn't hire anyone for 2 years. I worked as the lady barber of Harlem. And to this day, I'm not licensed, but I helped create the licensing for natural hairdressers that's now been adopted across America, so that natural hair stylists can go through a curriculum that does not require them to use chemicals and be exposed to chemicals, but to learn safe techniques. And I was able to sell it in 10 years because I said, I'm going to create it, I'm going to sell it. And almost 10 years to date, this young Black woman walked up to the reception desk and said, would do you ever think of selling this? I've been coming here for 9 years. And I said, let's have lunch tomorrow. And she purchased Turning Heads. And I felt like I did better on that business than any, modeling job. And just the fact that I was giving jobs in Harlem when there were no jobs, we became a licensing center for other hairdressers, and it sold 3 times. So I was very proud of that.
Peggy was the first model. We had Joyce Walker, who wore the little natural, but Peggy was the first Black model to refuse to straighten her hair on a job.
No, I said you could blow it out or you could do it safely, but I would not straighten with chemicals. And my thing was, everyone can do what they want to do, but do it safely. And be honest with you, the Vogue cover was kind of a mistake, because I went, and ordinarily we don't get Black hairdressers. We don't get hairdressers that know how to do our hair. So Carrie Warren said, I don't know what to do with this. And I said, go to the kitchen and get a bottle of olive oil. And I went in the bathroom at Albert Watts and stuck my head in the sink and poured the oil on it. And when I came out, he said, that's amazing. That is amazing. And I was like, but you got to do it. He said, no, it's done. And so that wasn't planned, but it was a defining moment, because after that, all I could hear was natural hair. I did 3 Vogue covers that almost looked like they're carbon copies, because they said these covers had sold more demographically than any other covers they had done in areas that they had never. I said, those are my cousins in South Carolina. So, but yeah, that little natural do became a defining moment for sure.
It did. It absolutely did.
And we were able to create techniques, like coiling and places where we've done a lot of celebrities who would come to Harlem from all over the world to get their hair done safely, because they knew we were going to protect them. The edges would be intact. And, and it was just a joy to serve the community, to give jobs, and people still walk up to me every day saying, why did you sell Turning Heads? But my thing was, this was my gift to the community. It wasn't to be my life.
All right, now we're going to turn it around a bit. What was the most difficult or challenging moment in your career? Did race play a part? And how exactly did you handle that situation?
Well, as a young woman growing up in the 60s, and I remember looking on a black and white television set. For all you young people out there, the television was in black and white. And I actually was a witness to the marches and, the George Wallaces, and I, saw Martin Luther King on television, and we saw those marches where they were turning the water hose on people and the dogs, and I was so affected by that. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to become a lawyer. So coming out of the 60s and going into New York City in the 70s, and as a young woman, as an 18, 19-year-old young woman, I felt like, hey, we have overcome. And it was, not a surprise, but it was kind of a letdown when I realized that, no, we got a long way to go. And within, I started freelancing for Glamour and Vogue, kind of like Peggy, before they even knew that I was a working model, because the magazines, it took 3 months to publish. So every agency that I went to, and also Black Beauty, which was the only Black modeling agency in New York at the time, they all turned me down. Oh, you're too light. Oh, you're too dark. You're too fat. You're too thin. Whatever the reasons were. And I was so naive, I didn't say, oh, well, I've already been working for Glamour and Vogue. I didn't say anything. And then finally, Eileen Ford called me back. There's no faxes, there's no internet at that time, but word got around, And she found the telephone number of my girlfriend who I was living with in Brooklyn. And she called and said, come back down to the Eileen Ford agency, which was the #1 agency at the time, and was the agency that I wanted to be at. And when I walked in the door, she said, "Oh, you lost so much weight." And I realized that this was the business of smoke and mirrors. And the racism was present, loud and clear in the modeling industry. I, from a family of great work ethics, I knew that and also as a competitive swimmer, we were always told to keep your head down and swim, touch the wall first. You can peek every now and then about your competitor, but basically you put blinders on and you go. And that's how I dealt with the racism in the fashion industry that was there in the 70s, and it still is there. It's systemic.
I want to piggyback on that because oftentimes I would be coming into studios after Beverly, and it was always, don't be like Beverly Johnson. And I was like, why? Don't go to the school of Beverly Johnson, because Beverly was strong. And I was strong too. I mean, I was a gymnast. So like you, we were being trained to be competitors. And that my mother had integrated schools when I was in junior high. I was one of 8 Black kids in that school. And I even run into teachers now who say, we sat in the lounge trying to figure out what to do to you to break you. And all I knew was put the A on my paper. So whether it be a Vogue shoot with an editor who's whispering in your ear, I wonder how many bales of cotton your grandmother must have picked for you to wear a dress like this. It is totally systemic. Or a photographer who always assumes the Black girls have to take their clothes off, get naked. Or an agent who feels like, oh, you got to come to the party and date a few clients. And so it is systemic. And it's also twofold, because you get it from Black people as well as white. And like Beverly said, in my case, I would get just the opposite. You don't look like a Black girl because your hair is not straight. So I just knew that we were schizophrenic about it all. And I felt like if it was straight, I would look like every other Black girl at the time. But I was one of those people who, at a very young age, my sister had straightened my hair and I hated it. It was down to my waist. And I came home, my father was upset because I cut my hair off and gave it to him. I said, you love this more than you love me. But in the industry, we have 2 worlds. We have the Black world, we have the white world, we have the buyouts. And oftentimes the ad weight for Black girls is a buyout, meaning there's no residuals. They will buy this photograph and they can use it forever. So those rates tend to be different. Even I remember sitting in a dressing room with Janice Dickinson, Christy Brinkley, Jerry Hall, and we did a thumbprint. And we said, that's it. We're all going to take the rate up and nobody's going to take less. And that was the first time we heard the phrase supermodel, because at that time, a Black girl always got paid half as much. Or if we were booked, we got 2 hours compared to a whole day, or 2 days compared to a whole week. So we had those quotas. And I don't know if you remember when Reagan stopped the air traffic controllers and said, no more quotas. Well, the same thing happened in our industry. There was a time when if you used more than 3 girls, one had to be of ethnic descent. So they dropped that. And even after my Vogue cover in Beverly's, I was called into the office of Grace Marabella, who showed me a letter from Reagan that I read. And it said, we do not relate to these exotic types. It does not represent the American image. And you have a moral responsibility to uphold an image that Nancy and her friends can relate to. And it was 8 years before Vogue put another Black woman on the cover in the magazine. So it was political. And we never think of that when we are going out on auditions. And I would often say to my agent, why are you sending me on an audition when they only ask for redheads? Well, we want to, make it look like we're being diverse. And I remember at the end of the Times article that was written on Eileen Ford, and it said, had she been as dedicated to the Black models like Beverly Johnson and Peggy Dillard, where would their careers have gone? So it wasn't easy being with Ford. It wasn't, I credit the bookers for being there for us, because the agents, I remember when I did my Cosmo cover, Cheryl Teagues wrote a letter to the editor saying, how dare you pick this in over me on this cover try. So this is coming. And I tell you, when you do a Vogue cover, Beverly knows the white girls get just as jealous. So they're trying to cut your legs off. But it's oh yeah, it's there. Yeah. So we're tough. We're tough. As they say, you don't get in the game if you don't expect a curveball or a spitball. And if you can't take it, sometimes you'll strike out. But stay in the game. Stay in the game. It's your game. Yeah.
So, ladies, how do you see the modeling industry today?
Well, I wrote an op-ed in June 2020 talking about systemic racism in the fashion world. And I called out a lot of people. It's not a conversation that I haven't had before with them. We were not silent by any means. But I felt that because of the George Floyd and what was going on in the world, it gave someone like myself an opportunity to revisit that conversation of systemic racism in the fashion world. And although we are now seeing more people of color, but they are not participating in the financial wars of the fashion industry. Behind those covers and behind those, ads are companies that are white. The whole board of directors are white men. No one is actually participating in the finances, in the monetary profits of that company. And so therefore, they basically what the article said, they are taking all of our ingenuity of fashion, and because we set the trend, we always have, in the way of fashion, and they are utilizing and basically stealing our ingenuity and profiting off of them. And we do not participate in the profits. So that was my my op-ed in the Washington Post in June, done by a Black editor who is now the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post opinion section, Karen Atifa, who I saw on television, and I said, oh, I want to do my op-ed with her. So it's just, for me, having been the token Black person of Vogue or of the fashion industry for this period of time, because when, like Peggy will attest to, that when we went on modeling assignments, we were the only Black person there. There were no Black makeup artists, hairdressers. We were the only Black person there. And so I just feel that today we have to continue to push. I speak to a lot of the young girls, Joan Smalls and Chanel Iman, and Hamelia, Winnie Harlow. I mean, all these young women that come to me, and they have the same complaints that we had 50 years ago. We're not getting the big contracts. We're not making the same money. What do we do? And so, the struggle continues.
I personally just felt that at a certain point I would go to Europe and you would get a list of go-sees. That's what they call it when you go out to see all the designers. And the list would have NB next to 75% of the names, meaning no blacks. Europe is known for having all these beautiful African women flood the streets doing pret-a-porter. And so what I noticed was at one point, I think Marpessa was about the only woman of any color who wasn't considered a woman of color that was doing any shows, her and Iman. And the way I feel about fashion today is there's really no representation of African American women. I'm so happy to see the African women and the beautiful chocolate skin that I always wish I had. But at the same time, the diversity is missing. And I think a big part of that is everyone knows Beth Ann Hardison. They know her influence on hiring Black models. And since Versailles, she's been the go-to. She has been the person that made sure that they put faces of color on the runway. But like Beverly says, where does that monetize? Where do we see the cosmetic contract? So the difference in then and now is we have the opportunity to brand. We might have brand before. Beverly had her wig line. I had my companies. But it was shunned upon if you brand. If you branded then, you didn't work. So you didn't tell people you had a company. Now, it's great. You can start with a lipstick on Instagram and you got a brand. So I say to the young generation, use this as a stepping stone. Don't get locked into thinking that you're going to do this forever because there's always going to be a young girl after you. So be gracious to her. Don't shoot her in the foot. For me personally, when I saw this happening in Europe, I came back to America and I said, you know, these catalog clothes really don't fit me. My arms were still growing at 22. So I started doing full figure. And I knew that the average woman of color, whether they be Latino or Black, were over a size 12, 14. And even though I wasn't that size at that time, it was the ideal place for me to go because I could come home, I could cook, I could eat, I could do what I wanted to do, basically. And I made more money in that part of the industry than I ever made in high fashion. Because people think a Vogue cover pays you a fortune. It didn't, it paid $200. And then Cosmo was where the money was, that's still the money cover. So very few of us will ever do Cosmo. But the money jobs, the advertising jobs, and all of that, it's still a void. Let's just say a void there. So we have to brand. We have to go in with the mind that we are our own product. And just like we can sell for other designers, I personally, if Prada or whoever didn't want to use Black women, I didn't want to wear their clothes. I have on Carlton Jones today because I buy Black designers. And I make a point of promoting Black designers because for a long time, you didn't see their fashions, you know, presented like they are today. So I think it's very important that we show that as well. And as much is important for the Black designers to promote and support the Black models too.
Do you feel that now that we have more, well, last year, and I know, Beverly, you spoke on this. So last year with George Floyd and all the other things that were going on, the Black Lives Matter movement, did you feel like the inclusivity that they tried to present was more of a trend? Because I remember last year, almost every Vogue cover came out with a woman of color on it. And my thought was, well, how long is this going to last? And then, you know, they put the women of color that were plus size and they put them on. So what were your thoughts about that and now and going forward?
You know, I knew it was a moment, and it was moving, and I was appreciative of that moment, to be heard, for Black people to be heard, for us to, you know, remind everyone where we've been and where we still are, in the way of systemic racism. And everybody came out and everybody was donating to the NAACP, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we're going to make this right. And it's just the same thing all over again. And now it's crickets. And it's like it never happened. One of the reasons why I was talking about the Beverly Johnson rule, and that's a whole nother reason why it became the Beverly Johnson rule. It was from the Rooney rule in football, which was owner. The owners are the board of directors in football because they own everything. And this one white owner said, this is not right that we don't have Black people in coaching positions and everything. And he just said, hey, we're going to do it. We're not telling you have to hire a Black person. We're just telling you you have to interview one Black professional for every opening, particularly in the coaching area. And 20 years later, you have Black coaches, you have so on. And they've got a long way to go still in the football industry. But I was trying to institute that in the fashion industry and these huge conglomerates that run the fashion and beauty industry and media industry, that you don't have to hire them, but you have to at least interview just two people. Just put them in front of you, because they don't even know who they are. Well, are there any qualified people? We all know that's nonsense. And then some people took it and said, we're not going to just interview two people. We're going to interview half the people that are interviewing for these jobs, because my whole goal was to get the board of directors diverse, to get somebody that looks like you and me in the room, because they make the policies and then they pass them down to the executives. If it doesn't get done in the board of directors, nothing changes. It has to be done in the board of directors because they set the policy. So that's where I was trying to maneuver to get people that look like us in those rooms. Black people. Not, there's other, Latin, everybody, of course, is welcome, but particularly Black people, because they don't know Black people. They only know themselves. They only know what they see and where they've been their whole lives. We don't really even exist in their world. And it's proof by what you see in America. So that's what I was striving for, and thus came up the Beverly Johnson rule. Crickets.
Yeah. Peggy, your thoughts?
Well, again, it has to move beyond the cover. When you look inside the magazines, it's the advertisements. That's where the money is. And if you look in there and find me 5 advertisements with Black women, that's another story. Yes, we do have some people in the big in the head offices, and they too. I mean, I've been told, well, you got to look like an Atlanta housewife. You got to look like this. You got to look like that. And so now I think our images are so distorted. They're like TikTok. Everyone has the same makeup. Everyone has the same. So we have this. I'm dealing with young girls all the time that I mentor, who I'm just stripping them down and saying, let me see you. Let me see you. And let's not follow the trend, but let's set a new trend. I'm not sure what that is, but I know that it takes me back to dance. It takes me back to sports. It takes me back to recognizing that we are far more than a weave and our makeup. And I think with George Floyd, whites and Blacks, because I want to give white people credit too for getting out there marching. We weren't marching alone. And, my grandfather was white. My father went through the whole, we went through the whole mulatto thing growing up. You're a red bone, you're this, you're that, you're not Black. So I think everybody has to do some soul searching to be realistic about who are we? Because what we used to call Black has become swirly. That's the new phrase, you're swirly. And when you're dealing with a number of people that are Latinas from Mexico, from Dominican Republic, from all these different countries, those are our neighbors now, who too have serious issues with Black and or dark skin and light skin with their African heritage. So just like in Japan, I didn't know that there were Black people. I didn't know they existed in Japan until I went outside of Tokyo into the mountains, and there they were eating hot curry and afros, and everybody was like, y'all look like that too. And so there's this need, I think, to be exposed. And fortunately, the internet has exposed us more. I look at the young tennis player that is starting her own line for women of color. And so we just have to keep on, as they say, don't give up. I think those of us who know who we are and know what we represent, we don't have to ask for someone else's permission. My mother always said, you can be out there marching all day, but what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So that's where I'm at. I'm with Beverly in that sense of the universities. I went to Pratt Institute, and I remember having to fight for an intern job, having to fight to be, noticed or not treated as though I was some poverty pimp program kid. And these things, as you know, still go on. They still go on. So I'm not sure where we're going from here, but I just know that, as they say, what's at the end of the rainbow? I don't know what's going to happen I know you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, neither do I, but I'm still following that little star, and I still have a lot of hope. And I know we can't give in, we can't give up, because the kids need us to guide them. They need us to let them know they are somebody, and we need images of color on every level. Behind the camera, I do a lot of film work. And when they come to my home in Harlem to shoot a film, I demand a certain number of Black people be on that set. I demand security guys from my neighborhood. And I said, and they're like, well, but you're the location. I said, I know, but that's what I demand. I demand to see people in production.
All right. One last question for you ladies. How do you see social media has changed the modeling industry? And how do you continue to engage your audience?
Well, social media is great. It's so wonderful that we can know what's going on the other side of the world within seconds. It's really wonderful. It's really wonderful that there's a place where you can go, and if you have a certain amount of talent, somebody's gonna notice. Like Peggy was saying before about branding. You are the brand. It's not necessarily the product, but you. Because if people believe in you, they'll buy anything. So for me, I take the opportunity of social media to be able to tell people what I'm about. You see my grandchildren and my daughter and my family and my friends and my and certain products that I love and that I want to push forward. So it's an opportunity for people to really get to know me. And it's so interesting that I right now my Instagram is down. So whoever hacked it, please give it back. But the power of please, but the power of being able to, it's almost like you really have relationships with these people that follow you, and it gives people sometimes permission to say too much, but it gives people permission to really let you know what's going on in their minds, because they're not, when you read some comments, there's a little truth to everything. Okay, of course we have to be human beings, and we have to be kind and thoughtful and tactful and with a certain amount of diplomacy and empathy for whatever we do in life. But it's a chance to really be able to have a vehicle that is not really controlled by a conglomerate, a company that is like no blacks allowed. So you're really kind of like, forging your own path, which I think you can do with social media. I think it's a good thing.
I think it's a great thing, and I think it can be a double-edged sword if it's used the wrong way. Um, kids are making a lot of money that would have never been able to afford to go to college. I mean, in many cases, I'm watching 8-year-olds who have become producers, who are monetizing like crazy, in coding, and now we have NFTs. So I go to them for tutorials. And the fact that you can have your own channel, it's really like having your own TV channel every day. I've been on social media a lot. Beverly's been on a lot longer than I have, but I just basically started 2 years ago, and it's been like a roller coaster, because your audience can be a little demanding. And I just feel like you can't let them run away with you. You have to temper it and make it, it's like a painting. Sometimes you have to just clear the board and do your Instagram page all over again. It's like having your own control over your own artwork. So people say you have to be on this platform, you have to be on that. I think you have to find the right platform that's for you, and you have to post with a purpose, not just to be posting.
Ladies, I can't thank you enough for giving us your time and giving us some information that we're getting straight from the icons themselves. In wrapping up, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I'd like to acknowledge my ancestors because I got to where I am by standing on their shoulders. I did a documentary, a little cameo for Danielle Luna, who was a black model from Detroit that not many people know about, and that it's important to tell your story. It's important that whoever you are, we need to hear your story. But I just wanted to, give a nod to my ancestors, my predecessor, Naomi Sims, Helen Williams, all these women, Ophelia DeVore. I would not be here if it weren't for these women that the shoulders that I stand on. Anyways, a nod to my ancestors.
But I have to say, when I started modeling, the runways looked like 125th Street. There were so many black models, and we supported one another. We competed against one another, but it was all, so I too, because when I saw Naomi Sims on the cover of Life magazine, I went straight to Harlem and on Cosmo. I went straight to Harlem to Frenchie's at Cosmolan, and I said, cut my hair off, cut it just like that. And that was her hairdresser. So to my mother, my grandmother, to my grandfather, who was a tailor and who taught me how to make a men's tailored suit ticket, and that's what I told Valentino. And he says, well, what do you know about couture? And I said, I grew up in couture. My mother made all my dresses. So, here's to the next generation. I hope that they learn from us and they take it to the next level.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And for our audience, you can find additional information on each of our panelists on the website of the symposium. Thank you again, ladies. Thank you, audience. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
So, ladies, we have some questions from the audience, and you can answer as you see fit. What advice would you give young women of color who want to join the fashion industry?
Well, if I may speak first, I would say first look at all the different facets of the fashion industry. There's far more to it than just being a designer and a model. I know stylists that have become designers, that there may be a process. But to look at all the facets of it, from merchandising, my background was merchandising as a student at Pratt Institute. So I was able to work in the industry in many facets, from fashion illustrator to display designer. You can be an icon in this business just doing the little things that people don't even see, the guy behind the windows. So stretch yourself and understand that it's not always about being a star, but it's the support crew that really makes us who we are.
Okay, Beverly.
So, well, it's kind of a broad question, the fashion industry, what part of the fashion industry, there are fashion agencies pretty much in every city, modeling agencies, fashion agencies, advertising agencies for local newspapers and so on and so forth. So you can find it, I believe, where you are. And I just believe in, really doing your homework and trying to narrow it down as exactly where you want to go in fashion. But eventually, if you mean the New York fashion industry, you want to be around it in some way. You want to connect with it in some way, connect with someone. It might be on Instagram, which is a great way to connect with people. But you want to get in the game. So
Right.
If I may add, I think the internet is a wonderful place to do your homework. You can research photographers, models, stylists, there's so much you can do now in the palm of your hand that there's no way you walk in the door like I did years ago with a couple of Polaroids, but you go in prepared because you're competing with the world. This is a world market. We have women from Africa, Brazil, all over that are far more savvy than the average African-American woman. So I think we go in with this naive impression that we're going in as an employee and that people are going to tell us what to do. But first, you must understand the business side of it, especially if you're looking at being a model, and understanding that you just don't sign the first contract that someone puts in front of your face, that for everything there is consideration. And if there is no consideration, as far as I'm concerned, there's no contract. So I think knowing the law, understanding the laws that revolve around your business. There are many agents, for instance, that were signed model management contracts, when in fact, they really weren't doing any management. Mm-hmm. And there was a major suit, class action suit by major models a few years ago that addressed this issue. So I think all in all, we have to understand that every agent is the same. Every particular talent is the same. And in terms of your representation and what you expect out of this business, I think you also have to be aware that if you're putting yourself out front and you're representing someone else's product other than your own, that you too are responsible for not posting things that are going to be derogatory or that are going to hurt you much further down the line.
And you mentioned contracts. Can you talk to us about the need for benefits for models? We know that's an issue all over the United States. And is there a need to negotiate these resources in their contracts?
Contracts are all over the place. A contract, first of all, you are the principal. The agency is your agent. So you could have, your contract is not the same as someone else's. I personally set up my own insurance, my own 401ks, all these different things I did when I was 21 years old. So to expect an agent to do this, I don't think you really want them to have control over that. I just feel that there's a need in this industry to address it on a higher level. Models are given a lot of credit, but at the same time, there's a prejudice from the acting arena, from a Hollywood arena, whatever. We're not taken under the same umbrella as actors. And there is no insurance. These aren't things that you can expect, but they are things that you can purchase on your own. Even when I had owned a hair salon and I wanted all of my employees secured, I made sure that they were private contractors so we could set up insurance for them. So this is something I don't think you can take for granted because we all are human. We're going to have accidents, get sick, whatever. I did a movie once where I tore the ligaments in my knees and, so that I was protected under workers' comp. Even when I went to the hospital and I was laying in bed while I had covers on the stands around the world, I'm laying up in Traction in Bellevue and I had no insurance. So I went to my agent and I said, well, put me on your Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, at least. And they said, nobody ever asked for that. So I do feel that this is something that we as models need to come together on. We can have all kinds of coalitions and all this, but until we address some of those basic issues in terms of life security, even being able to, like SAG, for instance, being a SAG-AFTRA member, they do workshops consistently on how to manage your website or how to do social media and all this. So we too, I think, have to move beyond just saying, oh, hire Black models. I think as a group that we can come together and find some solutions for young models. This is not a career for most people. It is a one-night stand. Mm-hmm. Some people make it a lot more. So I think, again, management, separate from your modeling career. There was a time after, I call it the Whitney Houston syndrome. When Whitney came on the scene, every agency changed their contracts. They wanted to, if you even signed a book contract, they wanted a commission of that. Well, most girls don't know that they don't have to, or guys, they don't have to sign everything that's put in front of them. They don't have to answer every question when someone puts a mic in front of their face, that they really have to be discerning and understand that that contract is to benefit the agent, not the principal.
Right. Beverly, would you like to add to that?
Yes, that's really great information, Peggy, that you just spoke about. We're independent contractors. We're self-employed. I like to call myself a modelpreneur. That's an entrepreneur and a model.
I like that.
So in one way, it's wonderful because you are your boss. But as a boss, you have to take care of yourself. There's no insurance. There's no retirement plan. You are on your own. And basically, the agent works for you. So it's that kind of mindset that one has to have when you're going into the modeling profession, and also for makeup artists and hairstylists and stylists. I don't believe there's a union and there's a pension or health care. It just doesn't exist in that arena. Now, once you get to be an editor for a magazine, now you come under another umbrella of a magazine. But basically, there are a lot of independent contractors in the fashion industry.
Okay.
And I love being independent. There was a time, I think I had 5 agents throughout the world in different countries. Mm-hmm. And I had no one managing me like I was a child. There came a time, I think, during this whole supermodel moment when agents were literally setting up girls with their husbands and all kinds of things were going on. There wasn't this expectation that you had to party in order to work. So granted that understanding the laws that revolve around independent agency, private, being your own contractor, as opposed to being an employee. Most people go into this industry thinking the agent is their employer, and that's not the case. So understanding those basic guidelines, I think, is very important.
I've just been thrown a question. How do you continue to encourage your students to pursue their love of fashion, given the political and systemic racism that they are sure to encounter in the industry? I give them part of my story and let them know that if this is something that you really want, you can't let anything or anyone get in your way. It's a rough road. It's a high wall to climb, and sometimes you don't climb the mountain. Sometimes you walk around it. Sometimes it really is that easy. And I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have found some incredible mentors who are willing to not just open the doors for me, but take the hinges off. And that has also allowed me to bring other students through.
I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer to that, Adrian. I think
No, there's not. That's why I was saying for me.
But I think what's important is to find out what's different about you. I remember at a point in my career when my agent was saying, "Oh, be like this person or be like that person." And I was like, well, why can't I just be like myself and find what makes me different and brand that? I think we're in a generation where everyone thinks all they have to do is create a logo and throw it on a t-shirt and it makes them a designer. So to stay inspired, I say stay in the museum.
Yes.
Look at the other influences. I remember Terry Mugler coming to New York and he wanted to tour artists' galleries. And his next collection looked like so many of the pieces that he had seen on his tour through Harlem. So,
and in the clubs.
So the influences is you got to be, if they say, if you're going to be in the game, if you're going to be at the bat, you know, be ready to take some spitballs, be ready to take a few strikeouts. But every day we get up, the thing is we do this because we love it.
Because we love it.
We love it. And we are from a culture. I mean, Africa still drives fashion as far as I'm concerned. And so we have to look beyond the so-called powers that be who decide this is going to be the most beautiful person in the world this year or who's going to be the top designer. I think it's not about who's the top, but what makes us different? What makes us stand apart from the next kid down the block? And also servicing the needs of the people. When I decided to jump ship and go and do full figure, plus size fashion, I was at a place in my life where I wanted to be more settled with my husband and not worry about if the same clothes that some designer had fit on a mannequin were going to necessarily fit my body. I was making life choices that fit my life. But as we can see with COVID, things happen that we have no control over. So I think, you know, like people, I listened to all the questions when the pandemic came, people like, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to wear no clothes? And I said, and if we do, let's paint our bodies. Let's make it, you know, let's have fun, because we just can't wake up. Like one lady said, what are we going to do? We all have to wear high heels. Who said we have to wear high heels?
Right.
You can create your own sneaker these days online. So I just think I'm so excited about this particular time that we're in. I'm excited when I talk to my students and, you know, the mentees, they have more than a college degree in the palm of their hands. And I'm really their student. They teach me all the time. So I think if anything, you have to stay inspired. It's not be caught up in your past laurels, but create new ones. You know, sit back and think about it and not do something just because someone else is doing it.
Okay, Peggy, I'm going to stop you because we're running out of time and I have one more question for the two of you. So think about it and give me your quickest answer. It sounds like high fashion is a rough road, but was it worth it? Go.
That's a great question. But I do want to address the question about racism in the fashion industry. I think it's really important to know that the moment, if you're Black, the moment you walk outside your door, you're faced with racism. The moment you go anywhere, the moment I go to CVS, I'm dealing with people following me around the store. No matter the moment you get into your car. So racism is there. And one has to be able to, of course, protect oneself, be aware, but also you have to enjoy your life and live your life within the construct of this systemic racism. And also making sure that when you're in a position to do something about it, that you actually help and do something about it, even if it's just by using your voice. So I just want to say that
I'm so sorry, ladies, but we are out of time. I would love to continue this conversation with you because there's so much more we want to talk about. Thank you again. Hopefully we'll get to do this again and we can get through the rest of the questions.
Yes.
But I wish you love and peace and blessings. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Beverly.
Bye, Peggy. Adrian, thank you so much.
Thank you,